Thanks for coming to talk to us today, Greg. It's lovely to see you. Greg, I understand that you're going to talk to us today about your story and things that you've experienced and hopefully things that may help some of the professionals that we interact with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks for having me. When you guys reached out, I was really keen to talk to you guys, especially as this is about providing support to the people that provide support, right? So
yeah,
so yeah, it was a really, really attractive prospect for me. I do lots of these sorts of things generally for corporates and schools and all these sorts of things. So this is yeah, another really interesting and exciting engagement for me, for sure.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
So I mean, I guess what I'll do before we, because I know you guys have got some questions for me as well. I guess I was going to start off by kind of detailing a little bit my journey, how I got into sport, because it was a bit of a unique route. I don't actually know anyone in British sport who's done it the way I've done it. Sort of humble, not very humble brag. And then yeah, and then talk about that journey, and then I guess we'll just dive into, I guess, the nitty gritty of the mental aspect. I hope, is this okay? I can even see myself lagging there. Am I okay? My
yeah, it sounds okay.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, I was I hadn't done sport really at all through school. I was a very fast. So I'm a sprinter turned bobsledder, and when I was young, I was very, very, very fast. We're talking like 8, 9, 10 years old, and I played a bit of football. And then I quit all that when I joined secondary school. So when I was sort of 10, 11, and became all about the music. And I was going to be the next big rock star. I was going to be, and this is a bit of a window into my mindset, which obviously is, or arrogance or whatever it is, where I thought, I used to get Total Guitar magazine, which is what I taught myself with. And they used to do polls every year or whatever, and they had the 50 greatest guitarists, and it was always Jimi Hendrix #1. And I used to read this, and I'd always read the top 5, and it'd be like, Brian May, Eric Clapton, and it'd go through these guys, Jimmy Page, and I remember thinking, like, so convinced, I was like, that'll be me one day. I will be one of these top. And I remember the conviction I felt is like something inside me. I felt like I am going to be one of the greatest guitarists. And so I played that through school and piano and drums. And I loved music. And but I still liked sport, but I'd just fallen out of love with it as a youngster. I didn't really care about it anymore. It didn't really give me that same fulfillment or joy that I guess I got from the music. And then when I was about 16, I started playing football again, and that seemed to spark my legs into life again. I remember doing a sports day when I was year 11, and I was there in like my skate shoes. I had like my Etnies, big clumpy like skateboarding shoes, and the lads next to me all played football. They're wearing like spikes and all these sorts of things. And I think I just came second to this guy who was meant to be like the most fastest guy around and everything. And all the lads I raced against, I played football with when I was like 10. They were like, "You're still fast. We didn't know you were still," because I was known to be fast when I was little. So they were all surprised, and I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe it's because I'm playing football again." Blah blah blah. Didn't think any more of it. And then yeah, so going through sixth form, played a bit of football, but again, it's like a bit of Sunday league, nothing major. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was your typical apathetic teenager. I'd really waned through school. Unfortunately, I was like that kid who starts out in year 7 with the exemplary report card, one aptitude, A's across the board, and then just starts to dip as I got to, unfortunately, 2 GCSEs where it started to matter. And the apathy kind of really began then. And for sixth form, I just bombed out, really. I didn't work hard at all. I didn't revise. I spent most of my time in bed, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had no direction, much to the chagrin of my parents, or more my mum. And then yeah, I through sixth form, I was just not knowing what to do. I dabbled with the Royal Marines at one point. Did I want to do that? And I was obviously like woefully underprepared for being a Royal Marine. I was 18 and soft as you like, and just didn't fit at all. And then so I kind of milled around. I did a gap year. I did a ski season, all these sorts of things. Which again, I kind of preface this with this information, like superfluous background information about me, just because it's a big part of when I stumbled into sport and when I stumbled into elite sport. It was easier for me to make the transition to being professional and serious because I had a life, if you know what I mean, before. So I'd been traveling. I'd been, from the age of 18 on the piss with my mates and going out and having a good time with the football boys and being a bit obnoxious. And, and I'd had my time having a good time. And so when it suddenly was shown to me, you could potentially be an athlete, had no problem parking all of that. What you get sometimes with current internationals who have done it from juniors age, and why there used to be this huge question in track and field of why our talented juniors never make the transition to talented seniors, and a lot of time they're burnt out. They're so tired from having competed at the top level from the age of 14 or whatever. Then there was me. So I was 20 when I was spotted in Guildford, and that was because I was due to go to America for a football scholarship, or soccer scholarship, football scholarship, and I felt like I'd put on a lot of weight, like muscle bulk and stuff. I'd become a bit of a gym bunny, and I felt like I'd lost some of my sharpness. So I went down to Guildford track to kind of work on my speed, and I bumped into this coach, and she's very famous because she coaches all the professional rugby players. So like Danny Cipriani, James Haskell, Mike Brown, all these huge household England names. And she's known for being this maverick coach and everything. And her husband, Alan Wells, was the 100-meter Olympic champion in 1980. And she sort of coached him to that. So she was very well known in that area. So she spotted me, saw I had some sort of discernible ability, and I was like, oh, I always had a big what if with track and field. I always thought like, I knew I was fast, and could I actually have done it properly? Anyway, I had to go at the 100 meters, and it didn't get me ranked in the top 1,000 in the world. So I thought, 1,000 in the country, and I was like, okay, well maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I'm 21 now. Maybe this has passed me by. But the Icelandic ash cloud went up that year, and it grounded my flight to America. And so instead of going to the university, I ended up going to see her instead. And then the rest was kind of history from there. I was like, you know what? I'm going to train and see what happens. And so I started training in the October of 2010. 2011 was my first year. And by the January, just after 3 months of proper training, I was on Channel 4 running in the UK Indoor Championships. I'd run really fast for the 60 meters. And then by the following summer, by 2011, I'd improved from 11.5 to 10.4, and suddenly was ranked in the top 3 or 4 for my age group and top 15 in the country. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I am born for this. I'm just for 9 months of training, and I'm there, and I'm 21, and no one has come into sport as effective as an adult and then made those strides. So everyone was like, so at the time, everyone was like, who the hell is this bloke? Who the hell is this guy that's now running fast and blah, 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 blah. And I kept training with her for a bit. And then I moved across to little name drop Linford Christie, who totally took me to the next level. And he got me. So by 2012, 2013, I'd improved a lot. And I was now racing. I'd raced Usain Bolt, had my first GB vest. I signed a contract with Puma. And so from the period of 2011 to 2013, I'd gone from being a pub chef to now a professional sprinter. And I was like, and it was just a whirlwind, and everything was on the up, and it was a really exciting time. And the 2014 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow was kind of my target when I started, and I was on track for it because I was on the long list. I was on the ready to be picked to go to that, and I had a good relationship with the relay coach who wanted to pick me, and I had a great winter of training. And then by 2014, everything seemed to fall apart. So I had suddenly all these injuries. I tore my hamstring in the summer, and then put my back out, and then I just seemed to have these repeat hamstring, back injuries, all these things, and it wouldn't go, and I found it hard to get into a groove. And where I was expecting to go from 2011, 2012, 2013, I'd run 10.4, 10.3, 10.2, and I was just getting faster. So in my head, in my inexperienced, immature, instant gratification head, I thought, oh, I'm going to run 10.1 now, and then 10 flat, and then I'm going to be, up there sort of thing. And that didn't happen. I ended up getting injured, and what ended up happening was I would run like a 10.4 again and think that was the end of the world, because again, I didn't understand anything. And you get for context, you get sub 10 100-meter runners, like your 9.9, your world-class guys. They'll open their season in a 10.4 sometimes, maybe even a 10.3. Like you're brushing up and getting ready to go, sort of thing. And we're talking at such fine margins, and that can be. There's so many technical skill elements that you could have screwed up, which could be the difference between a 10.2 and a 10.3, and that sort of thing. So, but I was just like, I've run 10.4. I'm only as good as my last race. I'm rubbish now, and I just had these like catastrophic mindset fails, which meant I just heaped pressure on myself. And if I could look back at that time, and if I could talk to myself back at that time, I would just be like, be patient. It's funny though, ultimately, I probably wouldn't go back and change anything because I love where I've ended up. Yeah. So, because I look back at it, people go, oh, what if you were spotted when you were a teenager? Maybe you'd have gone on and done well. I was like, well, yeah, or equally, I might have burnt out like all the other ones, and might not have gone anywhere. So it happened the way it happened, and that's kind of fine by me at the moment. So anyway, so 2014, 15, 16, I had lots of injuries and really, really struggled. And by 2016, after a long time out with a misdiagnosed stress fracture in my ankle, I came back to running really fast again. And in 100 meters, I equaled my personal best first time out. It was the Rio Olympics year. And I thought, brilliant, I'm back on track and I'm going to go for the Rio Olympics. And then a week later, I pulled up at a race in Portugal, torn hamstring again, and then the Olympic trials the week later. After that, I barely limped out of the semi-final because I couldn't run again. And I was like, I'm sick of this now. I can't keep putting all this work in the winter to then pulling my hamstring in the summer, having nothing to show for it. So I made the sideways move to bobsleigh. Trialed for them, did very well, and because I was always a power sprinter, and that's what you need in bobsleigh. It's all about the start. It's about the velocity you give your pilot, because obviously we're a big, heavy thing falling down ice. So it's a gravity sport, and if you haven't got the velocity at the start, then the pilot's got nothing to work with on the way down. So in bobsleigh, you're looking at a fast start to give you a fast finish. So the brakemen are essential for that, and obviously for we're called brakemen, obviously for pulling the brakes as well, because you've got to bring the chaos to a stop. And yeah, so I just absolutely found my niche in that. And the idea initially was to do bobsleigh in the winter, get my confidence back, compete for my country. There was an Olympics in 2018, so go for that, and do sprinting in the summer. And what ended up happening was I ended up falling in love with bobsleigh and loving the training, loving the environment, loving the camaraderie. I've always been someone who's, I think in sprinting where I struggled was I was someone who was always a team player and a team person, like pigeonholed into an individual environment and stuff, and a bit of a square peg in a round hole in that respect. So I was kind of faking it to try and be, good. And it's great, like when you do well and it's on you, and it's great to have that, that autonomy and that self, realization sort of thing that you're good enough and everything. But I always got more out of being a part of a team, and I always blossom in team environments and stuff. And so doing bobsleigh, it just gave me that opportunity to kind of have the best of both worlds, because you have to still be brilliant on your own. You have to be powerful, fast. You have to be in shape. You've got to be everything you bring to that sled. Those are the tangibles, but the intangibles, the stuff, the camaraderie, the connection, the trust, all the things that go along with actually what makes a great start. In the same way that sometimes you get the best 4x100 meter relay team isn't necessarily the four fastest people. Generally, it's the people with the best skills, the best teamsmanship, the best camaraderie, the people that are willing to do what it takes to achieve the goal. That's it's bigger than you. It's about the team, and it's bigger than you, and that's always gets more out of people. When you can see something beyond yourself, it always gets more out of people. And so that was kind of what happened. And then I made the 2018 games, and that was great, but we didn't do very well. Athletically, we did well. We were some of the fastest starters, which was our kind of KPI, if you like. That was what we had to hit. But we had rubbish kit. And just like in Formula One, if you're in a slow car, you're not going anywhere. So we had that problem. So we were starting like third or fourth fastest, but coming down 17th. And the pilot drove well. But we were lambasted in the media because of that, and we lost all our funding. And then that kind of fast forwards us now to the last 4 years, the journey we've been on, which has been self-funding, finding sponsors, finding high net worth individuals, people that will get involved with our journey, because bobsleigh is such an expensive sport. It's expensive to keep you on the ice. It's expensive to get around. It's expensive to live. And the money we got in, which was to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds, none of that went to the athletes. That wasn't pay and any of that. That was literally the getting us on season. That's hotel costs, food, fuel, freighting, kit, equipment, all these sorts of things. So yeah, it was a huge sacrifice and took everything of us. And now we've just found out we've just won back our funding last week.
I saw that. That's
amazing.
So thank you. No, we're enormously proud of it. Like it has been a very, very difficult journey, and it's one sometimes I look back on, I try and think, I don't like to glamorize it too much, because it's as great as that is, there was a lot lost along the way, a lot of stuff for each guy personally, and for personal lives at home and professionally and financially and all those things. But this is part of the thing I'm going to talk about once I get off my boring story of myself, is that this is where the things about responsibility and purpose and how these things underpinned that journey and kept me on the straight and narrow and stopped me from quitting, stopped me from giving up, and when potentially and arguably and maybe even forgivably I could have. So yeah, anyway, and we got to, like I say, we got to Beijing 2022 this year, and we got a top 6, which was great. And we were starting again, but it's the same sort of situation, but better than Pyeongchang in 2018. We were starting top 2, which a British Olympic crew, I don't know, has done certainly not in recent history, or in the modern recorded history. And we won lots of World Cup medals this season. So we are, I believe, the most decorated British bobsleigh crew ever. And we did that in one season, and that was this season. So when we went So when we went to the games, we really were hopeful of winning a medal. That was what we wanted out of it, and we believe we should have. And certainly, as myself and Brad had won silver in the two-man event at the test event back in October. So obviously we all went to Beijing, and normally you'd go the year before because of COVID, we couldn't. So we went on the October, tested the track. Brad and I did the two-man, and we got silver. So we were like, brilliant. We're back in February, do that again, and we got a medal. And something changed. I don't know what it was. The kit wasn't running as fast because we were. Like I said, our starts were way up there. Brad drove well. Again, there was nothing like, oh, Brad, you were smashing every wall on the way down. Like, not at all. He drove brilliantly, to the point of, you can see in footage, he gets out at the bottom of the track and he's like this, and looking at us like that was a perfect run. And I'm at number 4. So when we're going down, I get the biggest smash up. So if the tail of the sled whacks the wall or whacks the ceiling, that's me getting whacked. So I know, and I know exactly what it's like, and I get all the pressures and all this sort of thing. But it was just smooth, beautiful, all the way down. And I know the bits where you lose speed because I can feel the skids and stuff. None of that. So we didn't really know where we were losing speed. Going from second to 5th, and then held 5th, I think, and then we went 6th and then 6th for the 4 runs. So there you go. But bobsleigh top 6 is still a great thing, and we did that, again on our own without the government backing. So obviously they recognised that, and we're a bit of a case study for them, I think, because we were athletes with true autonomy. Like we found our money, we found our funding, lots and lots of money. Drop in the ocean compared to what other nations are spending, but still we found that money and we decided where it went. So, and again, I think they could see there's a degree of trust there because they could see it didn't go in our pockets. It went to pay for the things we needed, which is why we then started winning medals when we started improving, and we proved that we ran a program better than the governing body did. So that brings me to the kind of the watch this space element with the funding. It's great we've got it back, and it means that we get our APAs back. The APAs are the Athlete Performance Award, which is basically your monthly wage. So that's really important that the athletes can make a living again, because we're always the first to lose out. It's just baffling, like how the athletes are always put last in all these things. But anyway, so we should get that, and that's great. But the watch this space element is that because it's UK sport, because it's government money, public money, lottery money and everything, it has to go through the governing body. So it can't just go direct to the crew, which we've done before with our sponsors. It has to go governing body to be disseminated to us and to run the program, as it were. So it's a watch this space situation because they didn't do a good job of it before. There's new people involved now, and we're basically just yet to see. Going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully they do a great job, and hopefully everything's hunky-dory and we continue on. And we've got Milan 2026, which by all accounts I'm going to be sticking around for. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's essentially my sort of journey, if you like, from being like, nobody, pub chef, to then running very, very fast, being coached by Linford Christie, racing Usain Bolt, running for my country, and then doing another sport for my country, and then going through the rigors of, being funded and then unfunded, and then winning that back. And then all those things together is just, the whole thing was an exercise in purpose and responsibility and perseverance, and really you can name any concepts you like. It's basically overcoming hurdles the entire time, because everything in my sporting career was a barrier. It was I was an adult when I started. That's enough of a barrier to sort of say. I had so many people that I used to play football with going, why are you even bothering? Like, there's no way you're going to run this fast. And then when I was saying, I remember being actually my first coach, and I said to her, I was like, oh, I want to run 10.3 next year. She went, just, get a grip sort of thing. You won't run that. And I ran 10.3 the following year, admittedly with Linford, but it was, I improved, and I improved again. And then it was injuries. And then it was a big learning curve for me to understand my body and elite performance and how this all works. Because when you're dealing with such fine margins, like, you can make the leaps from an 11.500 meter runner to 10.5 potentially. Those are bigger, easier chunks to take because there's so much to improve there, and there's so much technically I was getting wrong. There's so much strength wise I didn't have, power, running power, all this sort of thing. But then when you start getting to your 10.5, 10.3, closer to what's actually physically humanly possible, the margins become so much finer that it then becomes a bit more of an art, how you get that out of the body. And, 1 year where you think, okay, this training program worked, the next year it doesn't, and, and the recovery element comes in, the resting element. Athletes are so sold on this, I have to train 6 days a week. And we get questions all the time. Oh, you must train every day. Oh, you must have a special diet and all these sorts of things. Some people do, some people don't. Personally, I like to live my life. I'm a foodie. I love my food. And I couldn't imagine having a special diet. My special diet is, I hold my mouth open and get people just to throw things at me. And whatever lands, I will assimilate and hopefully turn into performance. So yeah, and like I said, so to make that narrative makes sense for you guys, obviously. So I'm chatting to you today, and to find the crossovers to, you know, your healthcare professionals. And so you guys you're working a lot with recruiting for home care, is that right? So people that literally go into, or is it all sorts?
It's mental health and social care. So
Yeah.
I think the initial sort of thought behind this was healthcare has just gone through the most challenging period that they ever could go through, with COVID and staffing issues. And I mean, it's always been a challenge, but it's just worse than it's ever been. And we talk to a lot of mental health professionals who are at the point of burning out. They're dealing with so much, and I think mental health has I'm going to use the word exploded, because it's so much more permissible to talk about mental health now than it has been. And what that's done is just opened the gateways. And I think it's suddenly now we're talking to nurses who are seeing and dealing with things every day that we just couldn't comprehend what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And lots of them are giving it up. Lots of student nurses are never qualifying because they're getting to placement stage and they're walking away from it. And I think one of the things that we've become really aware of is about that internal resilience, which is where I think the synergy is between with what you're talking about, although it's slightly different in its sporting. It's that mental ability to keep going when you feel like everything else around you is falling apart or falling down, or you don't know where to turn to. So that's where we thought that the interest would come from, with the mental health professionals that we deal with.
No, for sure, and it does. Like the crossovers are all there. It's funny because when I do these talks, and I'm very much, I self-deprecate a lot about bobsleigh, and because it's this crazy, dangerous, silly sport, and because there's a lot of novelty with cool runnings and stuff like that. I try and think about how, you know, I want to make it clear that there's no that there are so many crossovers from whether I'm a bobsledder or a racing driver or really any Olympic sport, you know, because of those journeys you go on. It is whatever the output is, the input is, like I say, overcoming hurdles, overcoming barriers, finding resilience, finding that bounce back ability and all that sort of thing. And all these things are tied in with certain psychological concepts, but also just my general experience and everything. Like even my own familial experience, like my brother, who I was saying, I'm coming from his house right now, his very lovely house. He when he started out, he wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and he was a psychiatric care assistant for quite a long time, and he burnt out from it. And he went off and did something else in the end and stuff. But I had so much respect for him for anyone in the care industry. Is why I was so keen to do this as well, because there is a level of compassion, I think, in the sort of person that can do that role, who can do that sort of hands-on care. When it is also so unfathomably difficult. And I've absolute respect for the people that go and do that, for all the people that hopefully are watching this and hopefully, you know, fast forwarded my bit to now get to this bit. Because you are taking on something that is going to, you know, people drain us at the best of times, right? You know, your mum can annoy you and that can drain you if you got a negative sister or somebody like that. But to go in and deal with people day to day who have these huge mental health crises and everything, and for hands-on care, like I say, it's an unbelievable level of compassion, where actually on the flip side, I think for a lot of these people, the kind of shortcut route to finding your purpose, your meaning, your resilience and stuff is almost easier for you, because you should be looking at that going, I am a pretty amazing person. I am a pretty compassionate person. There are not many people that can do this job and do it gladly. And I know for me, like, and for when I talk to people about when some people are really struggling in their own little world, and we all have our own little pity parties sometime, right? And, you know, and we all feel like, you know, our trauma is so much worse and more serious than everybody else's and stuff like that. And you realize when you start putting perspective on your issues, and that's not trivializing your problems because someone down the street's got it worse than you, but putting your stuff into perspective, you know, being grateful for what you have, not lamenting for what you don't, that sort of thing and everything. A lot of the time, the stuff that pulls you out of these sorts of funks are doing deeds for other people, right? And doing something charitable, doing something giving, because it's chemical. It sparks the endorphins. It makes you feel better. Dopamine. It gives you feel good chemicals, right? So there's just a very simple chemical reaction to doing good for people, and, you know, it's the irony of doing good to feel good, you know. I think it was like the Joey from Friends thing, wasn't it? Where he's like, there's no such thing as a selfless good deed and everything. But, well, you know what? If everyone's getting something out of it, then what's the problem? But but certainly when when I look at this stuff, and when it comes to purpose and finding meaning in life, there's, you know, I do a lot of reading on this stuff because I find it fascinating, and because I have had innumerable mental health spirals and stuff, and I've had my own personal stuff. I'll touch on it leading into this just because it's relevant, not for my X Factor sob story, but I just wanted to show that it relates in every single possible way, because when it comes to finding meaning in everything, there's an amazing book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning, and it's basically his. He was a big Austrian psychotherapist like Sigmund Freud. He's essentially started what he calls the third school of Viennese psychotherapy after Freud and I think Jung and stuff. So, and that's logotherapy. And he stumbled on it because he was a Holocaust survivor. He had in unbelievable, unalterable suffering, but witnessed people persevering and moving through and stuff like that. And he was a psychotherapist in a concentration camp, and he witnessed people finding meaning in the face of the most unalterable, unavoidable suffering. So he then basically concluded that mankind's central driver for existence, all of us, the thing that links us all together, is finding a purpose and finding a meaning. And that can be on the micro scale of what you do day to day, or a bedrock of purpose and meaning because you want to live a good life, you want to look after your family, you want to be a compassionate person. You know, you can have the words written on your mirror in the morning: compassionate, kind, patient, and then go out in your day and keep those words in your head. And when you come home, you can look at those words and say, did I live that out today? Was I doing that today? Was I a better citizen today? And these sorts of things. Those are little like tips you can sort of stick in anyway, which I found bizarrely useful actually, because we all have days we come home and go, I was not compassionate in the car park today, I was not kind. I saw that final space that old lady was reversing into and I pulled into it. And no, I absolutely, I talk about this stuff because I really resonated with logotherapy, because it's what logos meaning, right? Literally meaning. And logotherapy, and it's about finding this, and it was like, he said it was in like 3 ways. I'm gonna try and remember them. It's like, they're quite vague because they're for you to feel, right? So it's like encountering someone or doing a deed. It was, what else was it? He had basically your attitude towards unavoidable suffering and everything like that. And yeah, and oh yeah, sorry, I don't think I already said it. Doing the deeds and encountering people. So it's how you, it's whatever meaning is in you, whatever you feel you need to do right for somebody else, to express love for somebody else, to extend yourself for the sake of somebody else, and everything like that. It provides you with meaning. It provides you with a very cogent sense of purpose, and that can keep you going, because life derails you. And it's another one of my favorite books is The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, and one of the first things he says in it is life is difficult. And it is like the great life truth. Life is just difficult. Life is hard. But the paradox is that when you accept it, it becomes easier, right? Because you're not expecting anything. You're not expecting things to be sunshine and roses. You know, you're going to have periods of great stuff and periods of lows. And that's just, and with the, like you say, with the explosion of mental health, it's funny. I always think this, I think because of social media and because of the technological boom we're living in, I feel like society is accelerating at something that is, it's too fast for us to keep up with. So when it comes to mental health things, we're now so saturated by all the, either, not even, unfortunately, not even necessarily the actual literature, but buzzwords and buzz things to talk about anxiety and depression, where now people are getting confused with, they feel a bit sad, so they think they're depressed, or they feel a bit anxious, they think they've got anxiety, you know, and actually, no, you're going through the normal peaks and troughs of an emotionally healthy individual. And sometimes I find that actually finding, for me, even me personally, because I've grown up in a house, my mum's a psychologist, so I've grown up with all the literature and I understand it, and I love talking to people about it. I love talking to people and hearing people's different experiences and everything. I find it difficult to find, I guess, a therapist, because I think everyone should have therapy of some kind. Everyone needs it. I don't care who you think you are. Everyone can do well out of it, because we all seek it anyway. Every time you talk to a friend, talk to your mum, anytime you need to vent, it's therapy, you know, it's all therapeutic. So to be with an actual professional who can help challenge you and challenge your neuroses and why you do the things you do, and find better techniques for dealing with anxious feelings or whatever it might be, or depressive feelings or depressive spirals. I find it hard to find people, one, because generally I find it prohibitively expensive sometimes. And also, so there's a huge trust element with the rapport you build with an individual, because for me, if I'm going to let someone go rooting around in my brain, I need to trust they've got the insight. And I don't even mean the qualification, because I've spoken when I was younger, and I dealt with this because my father's a recovering alcoholic. and we had a lot of problems when we were younger. And I saw like a childhood therapist or whatever, and he was something extortionately expensive, which I already felt guilt for my mum paying for. And I remember speaking to this guy and thinking, he sat there telling me how we were building a rapport. I had 2 sessions with him, and I was like, I don't want to see this person ever again. It was disgustingly expensive. He didn't know what he was talking about, and he certainly didn't offer me anything. What I got out of it was the car rides with my mum. They were long enough that I got to talk to her, and it was that helped me. So it was kind of like, oh, mum, I could have saved you 250 quid there if you just driven me around the block or something. We could have just put that money into the fuel. But it was, yeah. And so I've seen people who are meant to be the best, and they're not. So it's an insight and an experience to trust somebody to root around in your brain and provide you with the right feedback and the right things. Because I've also talked to counselors where my brother, he had a free one when he worked at Moonpig. He was like, oh, I'll get one of these corporate well-being things. Do you want to have this free counselling session? I was like, okay, because I'm always looking for someone. Like, it would be great to find someone. Yeah. And I chatted to this person. She was very nice, but it kind of vindicated my feelings on this stuff, where it was like stuff of some of the insight offered to me. I was like, no, that's not right. And it was well intentioned and everything, but it wasn't right. So for me, I think I need to get over myself a little bit with this, and maybe even lower my standards and trust to just talk to somebody or whatever. I'm very particular about it. But yeah, it's for me, the purpose side of things and the meaning side of things, it's it all feeds into. So when I do these talks, especially with the kids and everything, you can pick any number of concepts: integrity, compassion, blah, 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 all these things that you should live your life by, and all these sorts of things. But the 3 I pick when I talk to the kids are self-efficacy, self-belief, purpose, and responsibility. And the reason I pick those 3 is because they weave into each other so well, and certainly psychologically and everything. So for self-efficacy, just to start trying to keep this on track and do one at a time, because I'm very bad for going off on tangents. For self-efficacy, it comes from the social cognitive theory, Bandura, I think it is. And I've got honestly only a superficial working knowledge of all of this, but the self-efficacy side of things is hugely tied to resilience and bounce-back ability, because for those with better self-efficacy or self-belief, they tend to bounce back better from things. They tend to be more resilient. And so that's why psychologists have analyzed them, because they're like, well, how can we analyze the more self-efficacious people in the population to work out how they bounce back better, and let's see if we can develop techniques for those that don't. So that was where the idea came from. So this person's got huge self-belief, they take the knocks, they take the hits, they get back up, they keep on coming. What is it they're doing that we can pluck out and give to somebody who doesn't have that so much and everything? So it's a really interesting thing to look at and everything. And it's you can tie into it quickly with little quotes like Virgil, they can because they think they can, or Henry Ford, the whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that's all self-efficacy, because it basically just means, because again, psychologically, they've done studies on it. They've seen that if you feel yourself capable and competent in completing a task, you massively increase your chances of achieving it. And conversely, if you think you can't, you massively decrease it. So it's kind of like, well, why would you think anything else? And again, when you're tying in resilience and stuff, it's where they talk about, goal setting and everything, where small achievable goals are super important. And these are ways, literally, they've proven psychologically that you can boost your self-efficacy. And it's giving yourself small achievable goals, but that are crucially not too simple. So it's not like, oh, today I'm going to recycle a bottle and that's a little win. It has to be just difficult enough for you to feel like you've actually achieved something, and basically you put in these small achievable goals, and what it does is it puts you on a spectrum of, certainly in a sporting context, it put you on when I wanted my little achievable goals, I wanted to achieve either, generally you wouldn't want this time, but I'd want to compete at this event. I'd want to be running this speed, or I'd want to be running this track session this time. I'd want to be doing this event at this time. All these sort of little things along the way. And what happens is you go through a spectrum of belief, which goes from, oh, I think I can do this, to I know I can do this, to I was born for this, and that's the way it kind of goes up when you build.
And did you always hit those little targets?
No, not at all. In the early days, more so, because I was making quick leaps, and you could argue maybe that hampered me later on when suddenly I started struggling. Maybe it did come a little too easy, too quick. Right. And so it's super important to hit those things, because you have to show yourself that you can do these things along the way, and that's just life experience, right? That's all that is. It's talking about experience. But what happens is when the setbacks do come, when you hit these higher levels of self-efficacy and self-belief, when the setbacks do come, because they do come, they will come forever and ever and ever, you will always be knocked back, you will always be knocked on your ass. It gets easier to come back from. It gets, or at least you find the gumption or whatever's inside you to come back from those things. And again, that ties then into purpose, because have you got a solid bedrock of purpose? Have you got a cogent sense of meaning and what it is you want to achieve and what you want to do? And certainly for people in the healthcare industry, like Christ, there must be an enormously cogent sense of purpose. Like, I want to help people. I want to actively, hands-on, do something to help my fellow man and to help those who've either been left behind or those who've been forgotten about, and the people, you know, I want to do that. And then that ties then into responsibility, because I'm going to take the responsibility to go and do those things. And where I tie this together to make it work for me personally was my dad was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer over a year ago. So in January of 2021. So he hit the deck, head smashed on the floor, blood everywhere, full seizure, and then he was airlifted to hospital. Obviously his heart stopped. So that was it. No, sorry, yeah. So forget, you move on, right? He literally died in the street. So I got a phone call from my sister saying, yeah, he had seizure, was so massive, his heart stopped, he hit the floor, his head was completely split open, blood everywhere. And by some miracle, an NHS worker who'd stepped off the bus did the business on his chest and kind of revived him. And then he was airlifted to hospital and all this sort of thing. And I'm in Germany. I remember I was lying in bed, and I'm very close with my sister, but she doesn't normally call me. So it's one of those, you know, those feelings, you just get a sixth sense about it. I knew something had happened. Didn't predict this, obviously. And then we thought, okay, so he's circling the drain. So I was like, okay, do I need to come home or what? And then they said, no, wait, stay out there. There's nothing, because if I came home, it's right in the peak of COVID, so we couldn't go in and see him anyway. And then next thing I know, a couple of days later, I'm getting messages from my family with him up and about, walking around, huge big scar up his head, and he's in his gown. I'm like, so is the bloke dead or what? Like, what's going on? And like matter of fact in my family. And so yeah, and then we found out they found this mass on the brain, and then it barreled along. So this is through January and February, and by the World Champs in February, we found that he had surgery. The biopsy had shown that it was this stage 4 glioblastoma multiforme, so literally the most lethal brain cancer. And if he's lucky, he's got 12 months. They say 12 to 18 months, but it was 12 months really, certainly his age. So I came home early. I did the 2-man competition for the World Champs. Then I left the 4-man competition to go home I had a sponsorship from a car dealership, an amazing Jaguar, a Guildford Jaguar Land Rover. They were fantastic. And they gave me this Jaguar. So I had this car at home, and my mum had already taken on a lot. And I wanted to come home and take on the hospital trips. I wanted to do all the car trips, the full taxi ride, make sure that they never had anything to worry about in that respect, and we just get this sorted. And I wanted to take that on. Little realizing what I was actually doing was I was finding purpose. I was finding a new sense of purpose, something new to keep me going and everything. So I flew home, we did all that, and then he went on 6 weeks of chemo radiation every single day, and then months of chemo thereafter, every single month, 5 days a week, every month sort of thing. Now, Dad is like one of those old school post-war rationed babies where you could put the guy in a microwave and he'd just come out with a suntan. You know, he's like, nothing seems to bother him, and he took chemo like they were M&Ms. Like there was no, he was just fine, carrying on through until and with his diagnosis in February at the Olympics, that was when really he was supposed to be dying. So I was faced with last season with a very real possibility that coming up to Christmas, this would be my last Christmas with my dad. And then when I go away in February, I could either be leaving knowing that he's either on his deathbed or dying, or when I'm out there, he could die, sort of thing. So all these things in my head, all horrible things you don't want in your brain when you're preparing for the Olympics, right? And especially Olympics where you're going in as a medal hope, and especially when you're going in for an Olympics where it's not just about you. And this is about that thing of, being part of the team and responsibility and everything, because if I was just a sprinter, then it's on me, and if the grief, if the pain, if the environment at home is too much for me, then my performance would be crap. But it'd be my performance that's crap, and that's fine.
You're a talker, Greg. Like, did you tell your teammates and stuff like that about it?
They knew literally that it had happened, and that it was happening, but I didn't talk to them about beyond. Every now and then a pressure valve would leak, and I'd be like, oh, it's been a nightmare at home or whatever. But generally, no, I didn't want to make it anyone else's problem. It was my situation to deal with at home, and I believed self-belief, that I would be able to cope with that. And I'm very fortunate at home. I have an amazing support network. I've got great friends. I've got a beautiful family, and I knew that I would be able to sort of cope with that. But unfortunately, so what ended up happening was, in the approach to Christmas, it was probably the most stressful time of my entire life, where Omicron was running rampant at home. I don't know if you remember. And I was in Germany. We were about to come home. I wanted to come home for Christmas because, as I understood it at the time, it was going to be my last Christmas with my dad. He caveat this with, he continues to survive. I don't know. The tumor has shrunk, and he hasn't been on chemo for about 6 months now because it's just staying stable. So we actually don't know when he's going to die now. He might outlive us all. So he's a complete statistical outlier. And when he was diagnosed, I said that to him. I was like, look, there's no reason why they have statistical outliers of people who are your age and live longer than 5 years or whatever. I said, you've got a son who's been to 2 Olympic Games. I say that's a statistical outlier, and you've done that. Yeah. So why shouldn't you be the guy that's going to survive? Like, we live in this, so why can't you be the exception? And he agreed, and it turns out that seems to be the case at the moment, which is great. I mean, the struggle with my old man is he's a difficult character. He's a very difficult person. So it's a very topsy-turvy situation. It's not just a simple case of grieve and be angry and mourn at the diagnosis and the potential loss of life before his time situation. There is, it's very, maybe say that for another time. But anyway, in the approach to Christmas, Omicron was running rampant at home, and then we were told at the time that if we test positive for COVID within 30 days of our flight to China, so our flight to China was January 27th, so that meant that 27th of December was our deadline. If you tested positive for COVID after the 27th of December, you weren't going to the games. So it was basically, it turned out to be, it wasn't true, and it was what all nations were told, I think, to make sure they kept their athletes safe at Christmas. So no one went out to the pub and got COVID and brought that back into the bubble of athletes going out to the games. Anyway, like I said, as I understood it at the time, I thought it was going to be my dad's last Christmas. But if I went home and got COVID, I was one of the irreplaceable members of the team beyond the pilot, because of my size and my skill set, being the number 4 and the fast guy on the back. We had no one to replace me. So if I went down, the games for the 4-man was over, because we wouldn't have had the same start, because we didn't have the personnel to bring in to replace me. And the boys had opted to stay out in Germany for Christmas. So I was there thinking, like, okay, I want to go home. I want to have my sister come over from Canada. So it was for my immediate family, the 6 of us. It was going to be not just our last Christmas together. It was going to be our last day together, because Georgia would then go back to Canada, and she wouldn't come back again, not until potentially his funeral. So for me, I felt this real sense of things are about to change. Things are about to really change in my family. You know, you had suddenly all these flashbacks to childhood and our holidays and the good times, the bad times, all those sorts of things. I'm like, wow, life is moving on, and dad's going to die, and everything's going to be different. And I felt like it's okay for me to want one last day with my family. And in the end, and the lads were so supportive. And in the end, I just thought, okay, because I agonized to the day of leaving. That would be the Sunday, which is the 4-man race, for the last 4-man World Cup race, where you'd either then break for Christmas, you then go off wherever you want to go. So on the Sunday, you literally finish the race, pack up your stuff, drive straight home, back to England, or fly in our case back to England. So I stood there and I just thought, well, ultimately, whatever happens, I'm going to choose family. And then as a man, I'll be able to stand by that come what may. If it all goes horribly wrong, at least I'll be able to say I chose my family, and that you can never tell me that was the wrong thing to do. So that's what I did. So I went home, and the pressure had taken its toll on my relationship at the time and stuff, which sadly, as a result of all of this, came to an end after Christmas too. So when I came back out into the new year, I'd had a relationship end. I'd had my final Christmas with my old man had kind of gone a bit topsy-turvy. I just felt like I just lost so much, and I felt like I was going to lose. It just felt horrible, and it was an enormously stressful time. And thankfully, I managed to avoid COVID by some miracle, because when I came to fly back to Latvia on Boxing Day, I had to go through Luton Airport, and it was chock-a-block with unmasked Eastern Europeans all trying to get back home, trying to get out of the country and everything. And I was like, I walked into the terminal and I was like, I've literally dodged COVID since I've been home, and now I'm going to get it because it's here. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Luton was, I'll never ever go back to Luton Airport ever. Absolutely scarred. But I made it to Latvia, and we got on with it and everything. But I take through that story because And again, it's what I've told the kids when I talk to them and everything. And it's not a way to sort of to upset them or to drill home some sort of really impassioned message. It's really just to show that, for me, taking those three aspects of self-efficacy, purpose, and responsibility, ultimately, we aren't in control of what happens to us, right? Life is chaos. Life is chaotic. You don't know what's going to happen, whether you believe in God or karma or the universe or just science or whatever. Like, life is chaos, and you can't control the cards you're dealt, but you can control how you react to them. You can control how you deal with them and all these sorts of things. So for me, it wasn't my dad's fault he got cancer. It wasn't my fault he got cancer. It wasn't my fault for him to find out in the most violent way that he did. At a time when I'm preparing for the most important event of my entire life, and a unique event that I've been incredibly blessed and lucky to have gone to 2 of in an Olympic Games. And but I had to take responsibility. If I was going to, I could either curl up and cry and lament why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my family? La la la. Or I could say, I'm one of millions of families who suffer with cancer and who get on with it and deal with it every day. So that's what I'm going to do. And that's what he's doing. And life moves on and the world keeps turning. So I will lick my wounds in private with the people that I trust and can talk to about it. But beyond that, I need to get on with it. I've got a job to do. I've got a responsibility, not just to myself and to the investment where my parents have helped me over the years financially through being unfunded, through the companies that sponsored me, for the people who've supported me. I've got a responsibility to do right by all of them and to make the most of this thing. And I did all that because I had a sense of cogent sense of purpose, because I believed in the journey I was on, that I wanted to go to the games and I wanted to go and win a medal, and I wanted to show those people the work that, the investment and the time they put into me, and also the time I put into this thing, that it was worth the investment, it was worth the gamble, to go there and win a medal and go and leave a legacy in a sport that gets criminally little attention, and try and be a good advert for it. And I did all that because I had the self-belief. I had it intrinsically in me. I knew I could do that. I believed in my ability, and I believed in my resilience. I believed in how I'd approached traumatic situations before and dealt with them and moved forward. And ultimately, it all came together to make sure when I was on that block, I was ready to go. I wasn't racked with grief and guilt and shame and worry and all the things that can come around through dealing with a bereavement or a terminal diagnosis, or a relationship ending, or or standing in front of millions of people about to do an Olympic Games. I just felt everything came together to be like, I am the best version of the person I can possibly be in this moment, which is the right thing for my guys who have all put this in, and they all did the exact same thing. And we went and we blew the barn doors off it. So what it meant was a pretty unbelievable burnout when I got home, and a real blah when I got back. And getting home was really tough. But again, the sense of purpose was what took me forward, because I touched on it briefly earlier. My sense of purpose changed in terms of when my dad got sick, because it wasn't just to help him, it was to help my mum, really. I was worried about her, and it was to take the stuff off her. So I resolved to be the strongest member of my family. I was like, that's my new purpose. I'm going to be the one who they can talk to, they can cry on. I'm going to live with them. I'm going to do the hospital trips. I'm going to do everything to take that off them. And what happened was I was empowered by it. So I took suffering and I became empowered by it, because I took responsibility for the situation, decided how I wanted to behave and react to it. And it's as simple as that. So I've gone really around the houses there, but I hope that's somewhat delineated generally my process and how I look at those things and how I work for sport. And I just hope people can see how you can take that for yourself, and especially like you guys are, for the guys that are struggling and have been through. I can't imagine. I just did a course last week, and one of the ladies on it was a pharmacist. And she worked obviously throughout COVID, and she said through every wave, it was like, okay, well, maybe we'll get back to normal now, then the next wave, and then all this sort of thing. And it just sounded like absolute hell. But she got through, and chatting to her about it, seeing even just her, she was so just matter of fact about it, got on with it, because she obviously had such a strong sense of purpose that she was really keen to get more sort of pharma knowledge, medical knowledge, better ways to look after yourself before you go on medication, to less advantaged communities and to people who don't have that same access to education. So she was really, just from working in that environment, that's what she wanted to do. So she was on this course. It was a TV presenter course of all things, because she wanted to learn techniques to speak on camera, to be able to put that passion out there, to put that knowledge out there, to hopefully make an impact in her communities and everything. So she was a really, really lovely lady. And because, like I said, I totally resonated with and vibed with, because she straight away just extolled all those values, all those tenets of, finding purpose and having a cogent sense of purpose, and that driving her no matter how tough it got. and no doubt it got really, really tough. So yeah, I hope that's somewhat answers some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. We knew your story was going to be really interesting. I think there were moments there that I was sort of silently dealing with myself and trying to bring my emotions back under control, because I think that it's things that all of us have dealt with in the past, and all of us have sort of come up against these really challenging things. And actually, it leads us quite nicely on to a question that we've had from someone, which was, you talk there about dealing with challenges on a day-to-day basis, and we all have challenges. We can have days where, just from Lisa and I's job, where nothing goes right, or every deal that we think is in the bag falls apart, and by the end of the day, it's the worst job in the world, and we're going to go and work on checkouts in Tesco's because that will be better than dealing with what we're doing. They're minor problems. It's a difficult day, and the next day everything starts to fall back into place again, and we're back on top of the world. Some of the things that you've shared with us during this conversation are huge. These are life-changing things that, one thing at a time, would throw someone off of their game, and understandably they could go and hide under duvets and no one would judge them for it. And you're talking about dealing with things that just on their own are life-changing, and the pressure that must heap on you, when you're not just thinking about your family, you're thinking about your teammates, you're thinking about the country, you're thinking about all of these things, and you're having to deal with everything. How do you keep that focus with all of those outside things going on? I'm guessing it's a case of needing to compartmentalize emotions in certain ways, but the question is, how do you keep your focus with outside distractions? And I'm sure the person that asked this question meant little outside distractions, not the magnitude of things that you've had to deal with. So I'm guessing, how do you deal with trying to just get through?
I think kind of what I touched on before is that that sense of, I always have a very strong sense of purpose in the things I want to do, and I kind of mentioned to you guys briefly off, I think before we started this, I was thinking about some of the books I read. Like, I read a lot of stuff, and I think knowledge is power, and you should empower yourselves with, if I can advise, books like The Road Less Traveled, which is my Bible for life. I read it when I was 16 and I grew up overnight, and I still read it whenever I need it. Certainly the first half of the book, he gets quite spiritual towards the end, which is not to everyone's taste, not really to mine, but his psychiatric approach to his patients, and his then musings on life and love and all these sorts of things are game changing. I say Man's Search for Meaning, the Viktor Frankl thing, to find purpose and everything. So I read these things, and I say little tidbits, like in The Road Less Traveled, of life is difficult, and then the irony being, when you accept that fact, life gets easier, because you you expect so many things. I think I've always been able to, I guess, compartmentalize, I guess kind of rationalize and find perspective on things in my life, because again, it's not trivializing my issues, because there's someone in Africa who's starving and everything. That means that my problems don't matter. It's not trivializing, because someone's always going to have it worse than you, right? There's always going to be someone, but it's finding perspective should be about you just taking a stock of your life and what you're doing and everything. And if you're generally, I generally try to be a decent person, I try to live well, I try to think of others and stuff like that. I can be just as selfish and inconsiderate and careless as anybody, but I do my best to minimize those more negative aspects and maximize the bigger parts and everything. So and I've always liked to, if there's one thing I hate, and it is, and we all do it, and I do it too, but it's about awareness of it. It's victimhood. It's finding ourselves as the victim in the great cosmic cruelty of life, sort of things like that. And it's like, you can be that way if you want, or you can take responsibility and you can empower yourself. And I've always been more interested in finding power in situations, and that's been, I don't like, maybe it's the Olympic mindset, I don't know. I don't like losing, and it's not in an arrogant I must win kind of thing. It's just I don't like the idea that something can control me. I like to think that I am strong enough to control whatever might come my way. Certainly I can control myself, and and if I ever sense myself slipping into victimhood a little bit, I've done do a lot of reading on, if you heard of the drama triangle.
No.
And it's this is a fantastic thing. And it's so basically it came up in like the 60s and stuff. And I think the guy, he's a psychologist who did it, but he's also like a famous script, Stephen Cartman. He was actually a script writer, and it was something they used to develop scripts and character arcs and stuff. And so basically, the drama triangle is these 3 points in the triangle where you have persecutor, rescuer, and victim. And it's essentially it's from transactional analysis, which is a type of psychotherapy where they, rather than sit on the couch, talk about your feelings to the psychotherapist, you sit in a group, and the psychologist watches your literal transactions, your social transactions, how you speak to people, how you receive information, how you move, how you talk. And basically the drama triangle is something that they found it's become more complex over the years, but this is just a super simple insight to it. We all enter conversations at 1 of 3 points. Or we can enter conversations at 1 of 3 points, particularly during a situation where someone's complaining about something, right? So generally you have your victim, somebody who's your standard, woe is me, can't solve the problem for myself, I've got this terrible thing, it's everyone else's fault, it's not my fault. Your persecutor is basically your arsehole. So it's just going to come in and go, yeah, you've done this, you've done that, da 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 da. No care really for wanting to help the victim. They find power out of basically telling them that they're in the wrong, and the persecutor needs a victim because they need to feel power. The victim needs the persecutor because they need to feel victimized. And the rescuer, which sounds like a positive aspect, is just as toxic, because the rescuer tends to be someone that comes in to save the day, but often is a mask for their own problems. Or they come in and they don't actually empower the victim to solve problems for themselves. They just want to come in and fix everything and carry on. It doesn't help anybody. And basically, the roles all interchange. I'm pretty sure when I talked to my mum about this, she was like, no, only 2 of the roles can interchange. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure they all interchange. Because if let's say we're in a transaction now, right? And I'm having a go at you, Lisa, and I'm saying, Lisa, you put the toilet seat down again. I'm a man. I need the toilet seat up. Okay, this is really inconsiderate. How can you do that?
We live together because that's quite common in this house.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, there you go. There's you being a victim. Yeah. So you can sit there and take that on and go, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying that to me. You're being so out of order. You're being so da, da, da. And then Louise coming in and going, well, hang on a minute, and basically trying to pacify the situation without solving anything. And obviously, I'm being sexist there, but for comedic effect. But yeah, it's basically you'd come in and try and save the day without actually trying to solve the thing of going, okay, well, look, we all live in this house. How can we be more considerate of each other and that sort of thing. So, and the essential thing with the drama triangle is whether you subscribe to it, whether you believe in it or not, like it is most definitely a form of transaction, and it's awareness is the most important part. So when you're aware of these things, you can then take action to change it. Because what happens is, again, when you read about it and when you learn about it, when you're in an argument and when you're in a social transaction isn't particularly positive, you find actually when you're aware of this stuff, you go, this is going around in circles a little bit, and we keep changing role for victim, persecutor, victim, persecutor. You did this, you did that. Oh, how can you say that to me? What about when you did this? And you just keep switching. And what happens is it tends to be in your most toxic either friendships or relationships or parental relationships or anything like that. And it's always in the most toxic ones that it's at its worst and everything. But we all do it at some stage and everything. But like I say, with the awareness, you learn whether either to go, you can either look at it and go, right, how do I make this a more positive outcome? Or how do I just step off? How do I just get off it and go and change and pivot? Because there are times where there'll be certain people, depending on their, how character disordered they are, who will just not have it anyway, and you can't win, and there will be no bounds to their escalation to wanting to get back at you, and you'll just keep switching roles forever and more until you decide to get off and everything. And to that end, there are therapeutic models for it where instead of victim, persecutor, and rescuer, you have the victim becomes creator, the persecutor becomes challenger, and the rescuer becomes coach. So the victim is now a creator. They're empowered to create their future, create solutions to their problems, and see the power they have within them to solve their problems. The challenger is the persecutor, where you can still be assertive. You can still challenge someone. That's absolutely necessary to get someone out of their victimhood too. And then your coach is someone, again, who helps with the creation side of things, which helps empower them to find the solution to their own problems. And again, that's something I really resonated with me, because I definitely tend to find myself in rescuer roles where my friends will have a problem, and sometimes it's well intentioned, and sometimes I have to look at it and I go, because I feel like, okay, I love my friends so much and I hate the thought of them being in pain or struggling, whatever. So I want to fix the problem. I want to help it. what I found is I have certain friends who seem to have more problems than most, and I seem to always be really helping them. And then I took a look at myself and I was like, hang on a minute, I keep helping them with this, but they keep having the problem. So am I actually helping? I might not be. And why am I so desperate to like save the day here? Is this something in me? Is this some sort of ego trip where I need to be the one to save the day? And it really makes you truly question yourself and challenge yourself and stuff like that. So it's a really nice little tidbit. If you ever want to read up on the drama triangle, it's a really useful thing to be aware of when you're talking about, because obviously the social transactions you'll get in the workplace particularly are they abound. They'll be everywhere, and you'll see so many opportunities for negative transactions, and you might think, actually, where am I coming in on the conversation? And if someone's being a bit incendiary, how can I come in as a challenger? How can I come in as a coach? How can I come in to solve this thing rather than bomb? And because it's easier, right? Sometimes it's easier to be knee-jerk and have a go. And certainly for you, again, your clients and everything, for people that are going into care situations, God, there must be so many stressful situations that you go into. And knowledge of this sort of thing, and certainly knowledge of your place, if you're feeling a bit of a victim that week, or no one appreciates me, or no one's done this, no one's done that, is a way you can actually take a look at yourself and go, well, how justified am I in these feelings? How justified is this? And actually, what do I want to do about it? Do I want to keep talking about it or complaining about it, or do I want to find a way to make it better? And that ability to take on absolute responsibility for things that, even if you are absolutely adamant and strident that it is not your fault, like I said, you could be mugged in the street, that's not your fault, but you can deal with the trauma of that sort of event in the right ways. You can either, again, be scared of the world forever, or you can seek therapy, you can go self-defense classes, you can do things that can make that situation better. You deal with your lot better. And so to really go around the houses to answer that question, I think keeping the focus, it's all underpinned by all those elements. I say absolute responsibility for myself, my life, and whatever comes my way, no matter how left field it is, no matter how sucker punched I get by it, absolute responsibility for what happens. Constant introspection and checking in with myself, making sure that I am doing that, because I can be a victim just like anybody. I can complain, I can be, we all do it, we're human. And there's an element there of cutting yourself some slack too, because, I talk about, it can all sound very grand and inspiring that, that I put these things aside and I worked through it and did all this stuff and made it to the games, but that doesn't delineate, that doesn't talk about the granular detail of the day-to-day in that, where I did stay in bed. Where actually in Latvia, when I was preparing for the two-man competition, I spiraled into a full depression, and Brad, the pilot, had to literally pull me out of bed every day, because I just felt like, what was the point? And I felt ludicrous. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be putting on Lycra on Saturday and pushing a bobsled. I felt ridiculous. The whole thing, I thought, and everything I'd worked hard for, I could diminish and demean and trivialize, because I was in such a negative spiral about myself and what was going on at home and stuff. So, but that's all part of that journey. So it's not just a case of, oh, I've had this terrible news, I'm going to take responsibility for it and then just power ahead like a robot. Like, no, you've still got to feel everything. You've still got to go through it. But if you've got these things, if you're aware of these things and everything, what happens is you put yourself in a better place to deal with it, to take the hits and feel the hits, get laid out for a little while if that's what it needs. But you learn how to come back, and you learn how to do it either on your own, or preferably you learn how to seek out the people around you who will challenge you and lift you to create better opportunities for yourself. So like I say, when you've got a strong sense of that, no matter when life derails you, because it will, and it did to me, you'll always find the path back.
Amazing, thank you. And we've got one more question, which I think is quite a nice one to finish on.
Cool.
If you could give your younger self any advice today, what would that be?
So that was interesting. I think I touched on that. I can't remember if it was off camera or during the talk now. It's all blurring now. But because people have said to me before, if you could go back, because obviously I came into sport as a 21-year-old, like, if you could go back in time, would you tell yourself when you were 14, 15, get down to an athletics club, get down to a track and field thing and sprint and everything? But for all my careers, ups and downs and complexity and highs and lows and everything else, I really wouldn't change any of it, because it's all shaped, helped to shape, the character that I am and the way I approach things, the way I deal with things, and the impact I can have on people. And I'm saying I may have an impact on people. From being a sportsman and from being a double Olympian, I get to do these things. I get to talk to people. I get to go to schools and have impact potentially on kids and get in there early to challenge them with some of these slightly maybe more adult thought processes and stuff, but to get them to be a bit more aware of themselves and how they grow and taking responsibility and everything. So if I went back, I think, oh God, I maybe tell myself to work a little harder at my GCSEs. Don't sleep through my maths GCSE. Honestly, the morning of my maths GCSE, I think my mum was away. She must have been. It's the only way this could have happened. My dad came home, who was just typical dad, not really aware of what was going on. Came into my bedroom. He was like, "Shit, aren't you in a maths exam today?" And I looked at the clock. And it was 9 o'clock, and I was like, "Yeah." And it was like this slow-mo of like realization that this is really bad, but it just was really calm. He was like, "Oh, you should get up then." I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get up then." And I got up, like got dressed. He drove me to school, and I walked in. Oh, cheers, Dad. You're like, "Yeah, okay, see you later." Walked in. The invigilator was outside the exam, and just the exam had been on for half an hour. And I was like, "Hi, I'm here for my maths exam." And they were like, "Okay." And they just let me in. No one questioned anything. I just sort of sat down. I was like, "Got my paper. Thank you. Got my calculator." And then I looked up on the board. It said start 9 o'clock, finish 10:30. And then it said Greg start 9:30, finish 11. And I just sat there, just started doing my exam. Everyone was walking out past me when they finished. They're like, "What's going on?" I was like, "No, it was this weird slow-mo where I just kind of, and I used to, maybe this was the part of the problem. I just used to get away with things. I don't know how, like through either.
I'm absolutely cutting this out of the talk so that my teenager can't hear this, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. No, I would definitely go back and not be so bloody lazy. But again,
hindsight's a great thing though, isn't it? Especially when it comes to school and academics and stuff like that.
No, definitely. And I always struggled with academia because again, I'm well, it's an incredibly immature thing to be, really. And I thought I'd grown out of it, but I don't think I have. Like, I'm interested in what I'm interested in, and I want to learn about that. And at university and these things, all those peripheral modules or having to learn all these other things, which, broadens your awareness, broadens your knowledge, and you should want to learn these things. If they felt superfluous to me or unimportant, I just didn't want to do them. And so, but what I found was like, I'm going to have to do all that stuff, but make myself so uncomfortable to get them this piece of paper. I thought, actually, do I care that much about it? Like, no, I don't. And so I found another way. And then, like say, as an adult, I do my own reading, I find out my own things, and I'm very lucky again to doing the Olympics. I get to speak to some very prominent people who, academics and like certain sports physios and biomechanists and people who are very, very clever and infinitely more intelligent than me, but I get to bounce ideas off them and I get it from the horse's mouth. So I've been a bit lucky in that respect. But yeah, I think I tell myself maybe to not be so lazy. Languages. I tell myself to learn languages. I went to a language college, which actually was just a way of bamboozling money out of the government for computers, because they're not a language college anymore, apparently. But we had so much opportunity to learn languages better. And obviously now being an athlete in an international community, and one that I'm very prominent in, because I've started a platform that supports the international athletes, so I know everybody, and I'm very lucky they all speak English, but I wish I'd done more linguistically as a youngster so I could speak better, French, Spanish, German, Latvian, even, everything. So I tell myself, pull your finger out and learn a language. That's probably my main thing.
Oh, well, thanks ever so much for talking to us today, Greg. I mean, I don't know about you, but I could sit here for another 2 or 3 hours listening to you sharing your stuff, and I'm sure that the people that we're going to share this video with are going to get huge amounts out of the conversation as well. So thank you ever so much for your time today. It's been really lovely talking to you. Thank you so much. No, honestly, it's been an absolute ball. Any opportunity for me to sit and talk about myself for hours is just wonderful. No, honestly, it's been really good. I hope I didn't waffle too much, and I hope there is stuff in there that people can take and. It's been amazing. Yeah, it's been really good. Thanks. No problem. Please, also, when this goes out, please give your clients and stuff I'm happy for them to have my email and everything. And if there's ever anything people feel has resonated or they'd like to ask a bit more about, they can email me anytime. So do that on the Olympian email. That'd be a pleasure.